Okay, everyone, you asked for it, Steve McEwen. You asked for it most. Good Cape Town boy that's in the UK at the moment. He said, you got to get Tim from Eggchasers on. You got to get him. So Jean-Andre Joubert decided he'll get him. Tim, I know you're going back tomorrow, up the West Coast tomorrow, and then he's off back to the UK. Why are you so loved in Cape Town in South Africa?
You tell me. Firstly, awesome to be here. This is like DC and Marvel coming together, isn't it?
Which one are we then?
We can discuss. But I don't know. I mean, people have said thanks for promoting South Africa, but honestly, I think South Africa promotes itself. I'm just hitting record, and I'm curious. And I like you guys. I'm an absolute rugby nerd, and so this is a paradise for a rugby fan, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, home of the world champions, back-to-back world champions. Where else would you want to be in on a day like this?
It's more than that, though. It's just the rugby is just everywhere. And we were discussing earlier. I live in Manchester, where no one cares about rugby. I coach my son's team, and the main job is trying to get 15 players on the pitch, half of whom might never have played rugby before. Here, it's everywhere. It's I mean, I don't know how much you've travelled and seen rugby elsewhere, and I know you've worked in the UK, so you understand, Zels. This is like nowhere else on the planet.
It is incredible, but you've also arrived at the right time in the professional history of South Africa. They're number one in the world. They're back-to-back world champions. They got an incredible squad, a very special group of players. The mad genius who's coaching them, Rassie Erasmus, great player in his day, just flamboyant, fantastic guy. It's finally a Rainbow Nation Springbok team. Sia Khaleesi leads them. They really do speak to the whole nation. And you just happen to come for your first time for 2 tests against Ireland and 2 tests against the All Blacks. I mean, it just can't get better than your first trip, and you've taken in the 4 big stadia as well. And that's going to be one of my first questions to you. You experienced Loftus, you experienced Durban, you experienced Ellis Park, Alcatraz, and then obviously just the Eurocentric flamboyance of
Bit of a loaded
DHL
question
stadium.
coming up here.
So you don't have to rank them from 1 to 4 because I don't want you to lose any followers or subscribers. You just got to tell me what made each one special.
Firstly, the fact that they're so different is what makes it special in itself. And Twickenham's incredible. Allianz is incredible. But that's the only place you go. And I love that it moves around and that it is so different. If I would take bits of all of them, I would take the pre-game party in the B Fields in Durban all day.
Preach.
And the rest of the night as well. They go on late. The hostility of Loftus. I mean, I was scared for the Irish players on their behalf, and I was completely neutral. The history of Ellis Park, just you feel it in the bones. There's just something special. It just gives you chills when you just walk in and look around and you know what's happened. Cape Town was so much fun. I think, to go back to what you said, the representation of what that Springbok on the jersey now means, what the journey that rugby in this country has been through is what you see in Cape Town more than anywhere else.
So your first experience would have been Loftus against Ireland, the team who beat the Boks at the World Cup, beat them in Dublin, scoring both games, claiming to be one in the world. We claim to be one in the world because we are the world champions. That had a build-up to it for me, and I was fortunate to be there in '96 when the All Blacks had come to South Africa. They'd won the last Tri-Nations game in Cape Town. They won the first of a 3-test series in Durban. And by their own admission, they had to win at Loftus because they were never going to win at Ellis Park at that stage. And it was the most incredible match, 33-26. The All Blacks defending their try line for the last 3 minutes as we just pounded that try line. Sean Fitzpatrick just drumming his fists into the turf. And Frank Bunce telling the wonderful story that they started singing the anthem and it just never stopped. And he didn't know that was the South African anthem, but I think it was one from about 1904 that they went and found. And he tells the story of just tackling, and then the Boks scoring, and him looking up and it said 76 minutes to go. So did you get that kind of similar feeling in that first 10 minutes of that Ireland Springbok test at Loftus?
The brutality. the brutality of that match. I felt so lucky to be there. And how amazing has this summer been? Like, usually the year after a World Cup, there's a bit of a lull. But Ireland and New Zealand coming to the country has been special, hasn't it?
The results have been amazing. We've spoken about it, maybe debated the performances of it, but the results, you can't argue against them. I mean, you're beating the All Blacks and beating the Wallabies.
I mean, to get Ireland as the first two tests, I mean, the side that has kind of had the wood on us the last couple of years, even though we don't play them that much, the side that claims to be one in the world has got an incredible record. Still never made it past the quarterfinals of a World Cup. And you think, with that team, are they ever going to make it past the quarterfinal? And then to get the All Blacks and interspersed to get the most vulnerable Australian side in Australia and bank a 2-0 there as well. I mean, it's the perfect scheduling for the Boks post a World Cup, where 2019 leading to 2020, it was COVID and they never played. In your experience of the Boks at the World Cup, was there anything that surprised you about the experience of being here and seeing the South African public and how they relate to them?
Surprised me. I was prepared for a level of intensity with the fans from the time at the World Cup, and that's part of the reason that I came. It was actually, I don't know whether you realise, but in the UK, certainly I wasn't really aware that New Zealand, South Africa was quite such a thing. Maybe that's English arrogance or ignorance, whatever the case may be. But yeah, obviously your rivals in Tri-Nations and Rugby Championship, I didn't realise it was quite a thing it was. So when I sort of got that sense, chatting to both sets of fans in France, I went, wherever the game is this year, in 2024, I'm going. Happened to be here. And I'd seen through the World Cup a level of intensity from the fans and a level of passion. But even my expectations of what I was going to get was on another level. And that came to light the first time that hit home. One Craven Week, I went to see that, and it was just like hundreds of amazingly talented kids. And then secondly, it was at 10:30 a.m. on match day, 5 p.m. kickoff in Pretoria, and there were people setting up their braais on the street. It's like, where else?
Yeah.
Where else?
And you also got to experience, and it was a great insert that you did, you got to experience, for us, the biggest schoolboy derby in world rugby. Paul Boys High against Paul Jim.
I didn't actually experience that, but I was so curious with it. I actually got, from the UK, I got Conor Creeker and Cobus Visa to talk about it, and I got some footage from a photographer who's from one of the schools. I'm going to come back and see that game and the Grey Bloom Paul Ruiz. I'm going to, because they're one weekend after the other. Is that right?
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure I come and see those.
Well, there's James O'Connor in the earlier days of the Wallabies. I remember him tweeting back in the day when it was still called a tweet. And he was like, I just switched on the telly and I'm watching 20,000 watches schools game. And that was Paul Boys High against Paul Jim. There's a wonderful story there that Zels and them ran in SA Rugby magazine. This World Schools Championship, where they invite a team from South Africa, from New Zealand, from the UK.
They invite a load of UK teams to come and get crushed.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the best performing team, but it's by invite only. But this particular year, Paul Boys High went, and they were just, or Paul Jim went, or Paul Boys High went, and they were dominant, and they won the thing. They beat some New Zealand side in the final. And then they went and played the derby, and they lost. And the headline was, 1 in the world, but 2 in Paul.
Amazing.
It's like guys used to say about Drickers, 1 in the world, but 6 in Boksburg.
In Boksburg, correct.
And it's how much that identity of the school is something that players carry with them the whole career. I don't know if there's anything like that elsewhere.
So, yeah, I mean, your experience of English rugby, the schoolboy structures and the junior structures, from what little you've experienced here, when you compare them, does that give you more insight into some of the challenges facing rugby in England?
100%. And I know still, overall football here is number one in terms of participation. And quite often people say England have got more rugby players, registered rugby players than any other country, which is correct. But what we have is a really big amateur structure, which you'll understand from your time when you worked as a coach in the UK. There's loads of guys in their 20s, 30s that are never going to be pros that keep playing. There's a really big amateur structure.
Yeah.
But in terms of the elite pathway, it's just chalk and cheese. And, in Manchester, where I live, my son goes to a local state school. Good school, but don't play rugby. You have to pay to go to school to play rugby in Manchester.
And have you seen a drop-off? So obviously when they won the World Cup in 2003, there must have been a surge in participation, interest?
I think there was, yeah. I think one of the things that's happened, and again, this is something I really appreciate about South Africa, is they don't pander to how do I put this without getting cancelled or bothered?
We won't cancel you. You can put it any way you want.
There's been the relationship with risk and safety and stuff, and kind of
Right.
apologising for what rugby is. In the UK, there's been a lot. In my opinion, there's been a lot of apologising for what rugby is and the reason we love it. And the best phrase on this, a friend of mine came up with. He said, "With rugby, the risk is the reward."
Correct.
That's why we watch.
Spot on, mate.
That's why we play. And I love that in South Africa, you lean into that here.
Well, I mean, Hanneke May used to say that ballet was a contact sport and rugby was a collision sport. Excuse me. And you can't take the collisions out of it. And we've spoken ad nauseum in the last 2 years about it. Yes, there's player safety, but every focus is on the player's head. But there's more damage done to the player's ribs, liver, knees, with cleanouts at the ruck. And if you choose to play the game, you do know the risks. But like you said, you get the rewards of what comes with that career, short term and long term. So we're all on the same page here, where it's when my boy signed up to play at under 8 level. As a parent, I knew there was going to be risks if he was playing in the forwards, and I try to keep him out of the forwards.
but the stuff that gets missed off is the sense of belonging, the community, the confidence you build from rugby. And it feels like the pendulum is swinging back the other way. It went so far one way in the UK, and the numbers have dropped in participation. And it feels like people have gone, hold on a minute, I think we've got the balance wrong.
That's great news.
And I think South Africa is a good example of how to.
But we also went, Zels and myself went with Dobber, we went in Barrydale, it was the Pretoria test. We did a gig then, we went to the local community, and then we went to Arniston when they played in Perth the Box. We did an evening jersey handing over. Percy Montgomery did the handing over. Dobber came in, spoke to the kids, watched the first team win the league that afternoon. Glorious sunset, Monty saved the Dolphin along the way. But Dobber was just shocked as the Stormers coach. He said, this is the essence of South African rugby. He said, we saw the Springboks beat Australia in Perth, but I've just seen another kind of Springbok win today, because there was a great crowd down there, the community was supporting them, and each little village, each little suburb has got their own set of international players. That's what they play for on a Saturday. And Zel's been hugely involved at schoolboy level, at club level. I think that's what makes it so vibrant in this country is the club and school system is so strong. And we finally settled on something that's proper with the Curry Cup. We accepted it's a feeder system into the URC. Only the Bulls are going to put their whole URC team in to win the thing. But we've accepted it's not the Curry Cup of old, and it's become strength against strength, development for the under-20 players, and there's just this incredible conveyor belt that's going on. And then the big bonus that we pick from anywhere, because when we said only in South Africa we were 7th in the world, Wales were even saying, will the real Springboks come and play us after they beat us 27-13? And it's one of those things Australia and New Zealand are struggling with, is you've got to play for the jersey and at home, but the economics don't allow it.
And you've now got the best of all worlds, because your players can play everywhere, but now there's success and private money coming in. That means you're bringing players back, but they can go elsewhere. You're also still playing against Southern Hemisphere teams, but you've got the experience of playing against the Northern Hemisphere in the URC and the Champions Cup. And now you're tapping into communities that haven't traditionally been rugby communities. And so from that point of view, I think it's scary for the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And we got that great variety now. When people ask, the old original Super 12 was a great 1996 for the first decade. It was just a wonderful, wonderful tournament. Single round, semi-final, final, best plays best. They diluted that. But the variety we now get with the URC and then with the Champions Cup, you're playing English teams, you're playing French teams, home and away, you're playing the URC teams. And we effectively have a 12-month season now. The Boks get 3 weeks off, or they get a 4-week rest period. But there is no pre-season anymore for the larger.
I was dubious about URC and the South African teams in it. What was your feeling when that first happened?
I mean, totally. So I'm pretty, I think most commenters would tell you I'm pretty old school. So I think a European team and club structure should have European teams in it. But I also can see ahead that the future for rugby, I think, is probably leaning more towards IPL cricket than it is the old structures. And so I think there is going to be an integration. And this is probably the sort of birthing pains of that. So from a South African perspective, I thought it was really progressive thinking to make such a giant move. And I think it was a huge leap of faith. It's absolutely paid off. And I think the South African teams, because of their brute physicality, add a lot of value to the URC Northern competitions. And I think we're learning a lot technically, because the Northern Hemisphere teams are quite jacked up in terms of how slick they are in the tactical side of the game and how they operate. So I think it's been great for South Africa. I think it's been great for the Northern Hemisphere clubs that are involved. And I think Australia and New Zealand have paid the price in a way for losing that edge that our teams bring to competition.
But I've got a question for you. How can we be in a place in a few years where you guys and South African fans think as much of the Champions Cup as I always have growing up? For me, that was the absolute pinnacle.
I think winning it. The minute you win something, it becomes something that you aspire to. At the moment, I think there's an acceptance that our squad depths aren't quite strong enough if you're looking at our URC teams, because you'll take the top 40 players, 20 are still playing overseas, 20 are local based. It's trying to get as many of them back as possible. But if you're looking at the Saracens at their peak, the Toulouses of the world, La Rochelle's, I mean, I was looking at their player budgets the other day, 49 million euros and 45 million euros. That was Toulouse and Stade Francais. I think in South Africa, the top player budget is, I think it's the Bulls, 140 million. It's 9 times less. So I think once we start being successful there, and we've got to build a proper squad to do that, our public will start taking that one seriously. And it's a very disjointed time of the year where I think you grew up with, you knew you were playing league and then you go into the Champions Cup.
And there was the 4 teams in the pool, not this
exactly.
this team, where am I? And 24 teams in it and 16 make the knockouts. It's just, it means you can win one game and get through.
Exactly. And then if you draw a team from the URC, for example, like a Leinster and Stormers, you don't play each other in that competition.
And they've ended up having the repeat fixtures, like, was it 6 out of the 8 round of 16 was the same game we've already seen.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then if you take the La Rochelle example, they won it back to back. They came here, played us in the last 16 in Cape Town, won by a point, got on a plane, which they didn't usually do, to fly 12 hours, stay in Ireland for the week, and they took a pounding against Leinster in the quarterfinal. So that travel factor is there. I think the mentality has to change, that it's no longer the European Cup as such. It's got to get another name because it's got teams from South Africa in it. But what did it for us with the URC was that the Stormers won it in the first season.
Yeah.
And
I'd say the Bulls lost as well. I think that's massive for the tournament. Apologies, Bulls fans, but I think the fact you've had 3 different nations winning it in 3 years, huge.
And I mean, just the first one was COVID, and so we could only get 30,000 in, was the maximum. The regulations kind of were kind of exhausted on that Monday. Then 56,300 for the Munster final against the Stormers, and then the one in Pretoria was sold out against Glasgow. But your point there is, the one beautiful thing about the URC is Leinster haven't won it where you would expect them to win it, given their squad depth and just what a powerhouse they are. But
that is funny, isn't it?
But the Bulls went over and beat them in the first in the semi-final, which set up a final for the Stormers. They took that one. The second one, Munster went on this incredible run. Yeah. They took 50 in the Champions Cup against the Sharks in Durban. Then started winning, not by much, but started winning, got the win, and they got that fantastic drop goal win against Leinster, and were magnificent in how they hung in there in that final. And Jean Klein and Achia Snyman. I think it's only 40 minutes Achia Snyman's played, but he played those 40 minutes against the Stormers. And then the third year for Franco Smith's Glasgow to come out. And for us again, we claim anything that's South African. South African captain, South African coach. It was like we won. We take it in. Achia Snyman was the star. We won. In our minds, we won all 3. Okay, so I think it's been fantastic in terms of the variety. There's been a big education process with our public to actually get to understand that Leinster is the Crusaders of old. They're as powerful. That Munster were the team back in the day. That Newport is now the Dragons. And give them context with that kind of history. And the one thing that skews it a bit is we go up there for the first month, take a beating always because our Boks aren't around. And then they come back during the Six Nations and take a beating. So there's still something with that scheduling that needs to kind of be...
If we had a blank bit of paper and said, design rugby, it wouldn't look anything like it does now, does it?
Absolutely. And that's why I think the calls to move competitions, to make space for other things, move the Rugby Championship up in the year, to make space, to keep the Currie Cup alive, and I think it makes perfect sense. On your point of the Champions Cup, towards the end of Super Rugby, I think all of us knew that competition was dead, and I think the last 3 seasons, the crowd numbers showed that was over. And I suspect that the Champions Cup, as you know it, is pretty much done. Not that it can't survive in a new format and a new framework, but I don't think it'll ever be, because there's a history, right, to the European conflicts. that gives sort of depth and tradition to all of those rugby matches. And with the South African teams joining in there, the travel factors and the sort of rugby economy of not sending your B team or sending your B team for away games, I think it takes a lot of the sting out of it. And in terms of selling the game to the South African public, the provincial bias and tradition here is very rich. So when the Bulls lose to Munster, the Stormers fans want to see how their team goes against them. And you don't get that in the Champions Cup because you're in different pools with players no one's ever heard of in South Africa before. So
and that provincial rivalry is still very strong. I mean, there's a great story about Jake White, and he had taken 7 beatings with Dobbo Stormers. But he had an emergency surgery, and it was 2 seasons back, and the Stormers had played Glasgow. And he came out of the operating table, and apparently when he opened his eyes, the first thing he said was, "Did the Stormers lose?" So, so for all the patriotism that there's around the Springboks, there's still very much, I support the Bulls, I support the Stormers. We may put out the platitudes and say, go, give it horns. But I can tell you now, when the Bulls lost to Glasgow, there were a lot of blokes smiling in Cape Town. And when Munster beat the Stormers, there were many a beaming South African up north, which is great for the game, great for the rivalry in South Africa. But what's really happened, it started to happen a bit with John Smith Springboks 2007 to 2011, then completely disintegrated when Alistair Coetzee took over with the Springboks. But this core of players under Rassie, Jacques Nienhaber, and then Sia Khaleesi, who's just gone from carrying tackle bags in the 2015 World Cup to being one of the senior statespeople of the game, one of the most inspirational captains. It's gone to, that's the unifier now. Everyone supports the Boks. No matter your religion, your culture, and I say everyone, 99%. I mean, there's still a sprinkling of All Black supporters, but that's about it. But and that's what's lifted the game again in the country. And the symbolism you spoke earlier, Tim, is what that Springbok emblem once represented. It certainly doesn't represent that anymore. And the jersey doesn't represent
And forget rugby, that might be, I think it's a good argument to say it's the most amazing sporting story ever. What that's actually happened, and that's one of the things I really take away from the weeks that I've spent here in the last couple of months.
And what the Khaleesi Springboks have done, and it started in that 2018 series against Eddie's English, and they came here on the back of that magnificent run. I think they got to 18 unbeaten, and then the Boks are 24-3 down after 15 minutes at Ellis Park and came back and won it magnificently. But Khaleesi led out a team that at the time I think it had 11 black players in the 23. And that was the first time I felt, as someone who's covered rugby in South Africa since 1992, I felt I was watching a Springbok team that spoke to this country, not a Springbok team that spoke to a past or a sector of this country. And they've just gone and built on that and built on that.
Another measure of that, I spoke to Dobbo myself the other day, and he said he doesn't think about it when he puts his team sheet in. Just writes the names down, doesn't even think anymore.
Yeah,
which is, I mean, that as a metric is amazing.
Yeah, and I think also if you look at Rassie's selections, it's exactly the same, because you'll see a very good black player who doesn't make the squad, and he's replaced by what Rassie may think a good white player. 7 years ago, if the black player was just deemed to have potential, he was going to get picked because there was a dearth of black players. But that all started again in our provincial and regional competitions. In 2000, when Harry Falloon was coaching the Boks, you had to pick 4 players of colour out of 22 for the Springbok squad. And there were 4 playing out of 120 in Super Rugby, and 3 were winners. And the first time he picked his squad, it was that 12-3 test at Newlands. We had to pick Conrad Jantjies out of the under-20s, who was a very good player, to make up 4. And he ended up staying and playing for the next 5 years. But when we sat with the Minister of Sport and he was like, we need more players in the Bok team, it's like, find more players in the Super Rugby teams. There's 4 squads of 30 and there's 3 winners and a prop. So that has changed magnificently. If you look at the Currie Cup, you look at the Varsity Cup, and you actually look at the URC teams, you're not looking and thinking black, white, coloured, Indian. You just think great rugby player.
Yeah, spot on.
That's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, so Tim, just looking at how England performed against New Zealand in New Zealand, and then seeing New Zealand come to South Africa and the way that series unfolded against the Springboks, how do you gauge, in your sort of personal rankings in World Rugby, how do you gauge the Springboks? Where do you see them positioned? Obviously, they're back-to-back world champions, but also in relation to a team like England and New Zealand. What is your thinking around that?
Well, firstly, and I saw you the other day, and I understand you're happy with the results, slightly frustrated by the manner of the performance, because I think what's clear to me is if the Boks play to their traditional strengths, they're a juggernaut that cannot be stopped.
Hold on.
Yes, you got an agreement there. 72%.
Tim's on the show every week now.
So I do agree with that. I also think with the way that World Rugby's laws are moving and the direction of travel there, with the age profile of the players and the kind of talents that are there, it's a smart thing that Rassi's doing to try and have a different way of playing, and fast tracks in Australia. So I get it, and I'm quite excited about what they can do. I think they're comfortably ahead on their own. On any given day, Ireland can win. On any given day, England could win. And I'm much more positive about England now than I have been for a long time. But there's the depth, the different... It's like what Rassi Erasmus is creating is like a Swiss Army knife. Lots of different tools for lots of different jobs.
Well, I looked at the 28 that he sent to Argentina, and then looked at who's not gone. And just running through it quickly, you've got a Frans Malherbe at tight head, Bongi, and Steven Kitsoff. You've got a Eggchasers Snyman, a Franco Mostert, a Loert Miller, a Jean Klein. Then you go in Evan Rus, Peter Steph de Toy, Pepsi Boudelesi, Ruim Fencer. Now that's a pack of forwards that's not even going to Argentina. Then you've got a Faf, you've got a Sasha, you've got a Damien Dialandi, you've got a Cheston Colby, a Villaroo Damien Willem. So the only place where I looked and thought, we maybe lack a bit of depth is at 13, because the two 13s are over there. And who's the next 13 in the mix? But to think that they can send 28 players, and it's still a hell of a squad that they've sent, to win in Santiago, and you just think of what's not going. And that excludes any under-20s that have come.
I think might be what might be even more what I find more interesting is if they persist with this new style of playing, which players are the best players to fulfil that role? For example, Willems are at 12. If they're going to go that way, I don't know. That's where I see some of the interesting selections. And as Rassi has always said, it's not the best player, it's the right player. And if he's going to play this way, who's the right player?
Your experience at the World Cup, was that your first real close-up experience of the Springboks?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd never been to a World Cup game before, even though it was in England a couple of times in my lifetime. I'd seen the odd game that South Africa were involved in, but never embedded myself in a city when there's lots of different nationalities around. And the number of times I would end a night in a bar sat with some Boks, because if you want to talk about rugby, and I said I'm a total rugby nerd, they'll be the last person sat next to you. One more, come on, one more. Let's talk some.
Tell us more about that. Tell us about South African rugby fans.
They're wild. They're passionate on another level, and that's what I really noticed in France, and what made me so excited to come is like, what the hell is it about this country that breeds this type of person that will just chew your ear off all night long about rugby, and really knowledgeable. Like they'll know, and much like you do, I don't know how encyclopedic knowledge of rugby this guy, isn't it? It's freakish.
No, beautiful mind, beautiful mind.
But yeah, but the number of fans that are like that just can rack off names and players and matches
while still consuming like a litre of brandy.
Yeah,
absolutely,
and
man.
Brandy. Yeah, not beer, not wine. Well, a bit more wine down here, isn't it?
Yeah. Clippies and Coke. Jamie Wall, the New Zealand journalist who came over for the first time, and we had him over here for a braai with a couple of other Kiwis, and his first post was Clippies and Coke, and the South African rugby public just fell in love with this guy. I mean, he was.
I've learned it has to be like all ice in your glass. I've learned that now. Right.
I mean, there was that great interview after the Ellis Park test, and some bloke. Oh, you were interviewing him, and he was drinking his litre and a half of beer. Yeah. And you said brandy and Coke, and he said, no, that's my wife's, the 1.5 litre. And she's just down in it. It was like a wonderful moment. I was like,
that's glorious.
I thought Tim's just captured the essence of South African rugby supporters, especially up north.
Oh, they're like no other, honestly. They're like no, well, so English fans traditionally get the little like red Cheetos and wax jackets and
quite posh.
And you would have seen a different
Land
type.
Rovers, there's a bit of that.
And you would have seen a different type of fan. So you go to Loftus, you get the bullhorns, you get that Beefield experience there as well. I mean, you go to Ellis Park, it's Alcatraz. It's like you've been taken in somewhere and escorted out. Durban's is like, it's so laid back. And then Cape Town, it just seems that it's a sporting occasion. The singing of the anthems,
Oh,
Is it unfair to ask you, was there one that was anything more powerful than the other?
Loftus. That was something else. And it was, that was something. It was the first time I'd heard it. In that, it was all the build up to that Ireland match, which was massive anyway. The noise, and it was also the fact that the singer, much like they do with the Marseillaise and at Murrayfield, let the crowd take it home. Oh, it was amazing, wasn't it?
Beautiful.
But Loftus, and Loftus is the playing surface. I remember that All Black side, they came over here, McCaw and Carter and them, and they always did well at Loftus. The All Blacks have got an incredible post-1992 record there. And they always felt it was the best playing surface. They just wanted to roll that one up and just take it with them. And they never felt the effects of altitude there. They always had to go to Ellis Park, 50 k's off the road, to talk about altitude. But Loftus for me, and I'm a Cape Townian boy through and through, Loftus for me, the rugby public up there is the most knowledgeable in the country. They drink the hardest. They're the friendliest. And I always say, if you had Loftus, rugby people, and you had Cape Town's beauty, you've actually got the ideal city.
Yeah, spot on.
That's for you, Genre, as well.
I was not nervous, that's not the right word, but I was aware I was an Englishman in Afrikaans territory. And but I couldn't have felt more welcome at that place, because like you say, if you've got rugby in common, that's fine. Sit down next to me.
And how's your Afrikaans?
Not good.
Is it good?
No.
It's probably as good as our English.
Eh?
It's the. I'm not confident saying words with a like you with the.
But I'm sure you perfected the art of saying like a double brandewijn and Coke.
Oh yeah.
What was
Do they sell singles?
Yeah, was Ackers David's biggest fear? Someone serves him a single brandy. Yeah? The players themselves, obviously within the context of South Africa, they're an incredibly popular side, with Sia being the senior statesman and Rassie being this, as I always call him, this mad genius. But they've really had to fight against the wind to prove to the world that they're as good off the field as they are on the field. How have you found your engagement with them over the time being in South Africa and obviously at the World Cup as well?
I'm going to challenge you on that. Here's something that I think I've learned about South Africa, maybe rugby fans, maybe the team. You have a sense that the rest of the world thinks a little bit negatively. I don't, and maybe that has changed. Maybe you're right, and it has changed. But I don't think it's maybe ever been the way that you perceive it has been, and that's part of the reason why I think coming over, I've got quite a positive reaction, because people are like, "Oh my God, you like us and enjoy us." It's like, yeah, game respects game. Like, your team's amazing. And like you say, characters like Sia, Rassie being a bit of a savant. But what I would say is they are better to work with as a... Did you mean like the team and the organisation?
Yeah, the team and how your interaction, your engagement with them.
I'll put it this way. In the UK, I walk into a media room with all the traditional print media journalists and stuff, and I think that they kind of... I get the sense that they're like, who are you? Here, the SA Rugby guys went, oh look, there's this new frontier online, like the shows you do, and they went, come and there you go. There's little pitch pass. Come and have an interview before the match, and then do some stuff from the side of the pitch. It's just forward thinking and recognising there's this new world out there that's reaching new crowds, and that's something that South African Rugby Union get. They just get it.
Well, I think also, and if I've watching your content. It speaks to the authenticity of the game, but it just speaks to the atmosphere around the game, and it's selling and promoting the game all the time. And I think, and just the kind of reaction that we've got from people when they knew you in the country as well. It's like, you got to get Tim, Eggchasers. Can you imagine Rassie looking up and seeing you in the press box? Eggchasers is here. Tim, come in.
Do you know what? So the reason I do it, and I bet you've got similar stories to this. Why do I have a rugby YouTube channel? It's because I was the first person in my family to play rugby. My parents split up. We moved to a new town. I didn't know anyone. 6. That's quite a traumatic thing for a kid to go through. My mum took me along to the local rugby club, and that was it. I had a place.
Beautiful.
I had, and that is why I love the sport. I love the 80 minutes, and I could, dive into the nuances of a line out or anything. I'd love to. But that's why I love rugby, and that's my mission, if you like. I want to show people that, and it's been so easy to do that in South Africa, because rugby's so core to people's identity and sense of belonging that I love it.
And also, excuse me, also acknowledging the comments that come in, acknowledging the fans that are out there, where you're not making statements, you're not lecturing. It's not like I'm the divine authority. This is the voice. It's like, what's your opinion? Tell us what you think. What do you think of the thing? And South African rugby supporters just want to talk.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, people here live, breathe, sleep, eat rugby. So I think that's something that you've experienced in your time here. Obviously, are you going to be there when the Boks head over at the end of the year?
I'll be there at the game at Twickenham. If you guys can come north, I'll host you. The weather won't be as good. The weather won't be as good. You can come for a
hot chocolate.
Hot chocolate. Maybe you can have a brandy English style with a cigar in a smoking jacket.
But just getting back to that, and you mentioned it earlier, and I thought everything is context again, because it was Razor Robinson's first 2 test matches in charge. England went there with a belief that they could actually knock them over. And again, similar to what the All Blacks are saying, one or two things that happened, we could have won both in South Africa. England could have won both in New Zealand. 16-15 in that first test, and New Zealand hanging on, defending that line. Post the World Cup, where do you see the growth in the English team? And then they play the All Blacks and the Springboks at Twickenham, and the Springboks are going to have to be bloody good to win that test match. And the All Blacks are going to have to find something special to win that test match as well. Is this an England side that can grow outside of the Allianz Stadium, Twickenham, where traditionally they've been this powerhouse there, but taken on the road, they haven't been quite as good?
I mean, we've got a bit of flux. I don't know what's going on with Felix Jones. What happened there? I've no idea.
He's on his way back here, hopefully.
No idea, but that's a concern. But overall, yeah, it's weird. I came away from those New Zealand tests losing narrowly, thinking, okay, well, that was good. That's a step forward, despite losing. It's weird how New Zealand, despite coming to the home of the world champions, are going home, and their journalists were giving Razor a real tough time. But so I'm much more positive about that. I need to reveal at this point, on the Keo Zels show, that actually the reason for my trip is to come and I've got a load of extra luggage that the RFU have given me to get some props to come back.
Don't take
That's all England need. 2 tight head props, and I think we're in business.
Well, mate, we got one that was at Harlequins. I think his stand-down period has happened. Wilco Low, you can take him back.
No.
No,
mate.
They loved him at Harlequins as well.
Yeah, they did love him.
The fact your 10th choice tight head prop, whoever that may be, would be in the England squad like that.
I mean, but that talks back to the thing we spoke about at the beginning, about the junior structures and just as much as you've got a lot of people playing rugby, the quality of the lower level rugby doesn't really produce elite standard players.
But the under-20s are always really good. But it's then what happens to those under-20s? Quite often they just get sat in the academy, not actually playing any first team rugby, and then they get to 23. The number of players that don't make it and never play rugby again is such a shame.
But I mean, if England had to pick their players from France, let their guys go play overseas,
I don't understand why they don't do that, especially as there's financial problems all around the world, right? And that's one thing South Africa have got. If someone else, some rich billionaire who owns a French club, wants to pay to take care of one of our players, and we can get another young player coming through.
Well, I mean, have a look at Ben Loader. He's done reasonably well here.
Great.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't get it. It's like, it used to be in the old days, Super Rugby, you can't play anywhere else because we felt we had the best competition in the world. But if you're playing for Toulouse in the top 14 and you're playing for Toulouse against every English, Irish, South African team, and then you choose not to pick that person for your national team. I've always been a big believer, test rugby is about the best plays the best, to test themselves, not the best in my country.
Yeah.
Plays the best.
I think it's madness. And I think there's a genuine argument that Jack Willis, were he able to play international rugby, would be the best 7, you're 6 in the world. He's unreal, and he's got so much better from playing in Toulouse, so it pains me.
Talking about the best players in the world, put you on the spot a little bit. How many of these Springboks would you pick out and out, so it's not a debate? How many of these guys are unquestionable locks in your World 15?
Unche, Marks, Etzebeth, so numbers 1 to 4.
Right.
Oh no, Malvaca would push Marks at the minute, so it's not. I'd say that's not a lock, and that might. I know how much South Africans love Malcolm Marks, but Malvaca is that good.
Okay.
That I'll say the 2 props and 1 lock, and Peter Steff, so that's 4 in the pack. Out and out, guaranteed.
No question.
Cheslin would be on one wing with Penno on the other. That might be it in the back line for absolutely nailed on.
Which 12 do you pick? Which 12 do you pick ahead of Deolandi? Because we love Deolandi.
He's absolutely fantastic.
You can't say too lucky because he's never healthy.
Well, Bundyaki and him in the World Cup were
Yeah.
they were the two best players in that pool match. Deolandi for the Box and Aki for Ireland. So I'd say on a good day, Bundyaki can put Deolandi in the shadow, and as a result, but Deolandi is amazing. But as a result, I would say he's not an absolute guaranteed lock. So 5.
Okay, so Jeremy Paul and Justin Marshall and their Good, the Bad and the Rugby came out and said, well, Jeremy Paul said, like, it's a wonderful chirp. He said when Cheslin Colby took the line-out throw and he nailed it, he said he shadowed over my career. As a hooker.
Yeah, so Tim was saying we've got the Swiss Army knife, so Cheslin is the scissors throwing it at the line.
So, and then he said for him, he's undoubtedly the best rugby player on the planet at the moment. Justin Marshall then said, DuPont, but maybe you make a case. At the end of it, he was saying Cheslin. Look, different positions as well that they play, but Cheslin went to France, played for Toulouse, moved over to Toulon, but really made it at Toulouse where no one judged him by his size. They judged him by his ability. Because we were still in that phase in South Africa where it was moving to scrum half. He's not big enough. He's not powerful enough. I mean, he's the way he bumped off Scotty Barrett in Ellis Park. I mean, he's just been a wonderful player, but he's an example of a player who left South Africa to become one of the greatest for South Africa. And you think of the New Zealanders at the moment.
What's his number of caps that he's got? It's only like 30.
He's
isn't
in the
it?
30s now.
That's crazy.
And you can remember nearly every one of his big moments because they were in the biggest moments, where some players will play 80 tests, you think, I can't even remember one that they played. But I look at him as an example, and you think of Australia, New Zealand, England to a degree, Wales when they were kind of like, you don't pick guys off that aren't there in Wales. They're just robbing their national team of a potential World Cup win, robbing the supporters of seeing the best players. You know, with the greatest respect, if Mohanga, Rhodey Retallick, Aaron Smith were coming off that bench, Carl Heyman, who didn't play for a decade because he was based in Toulon. I mean, we've been the beneficiaries of seeing just how much better our players come back from playing in Japan, playing overseas. They experience different cultures, different styles of play, and also they grow as human beings. I think that's been the biggest thing that we've seen with our players is those who have gone to Japan embrace the lifestyle. Most of them embrace that French lifestyle. You've got guys, English-speaking guys who go over to France. They were schooled in Afrikaans here. They couldn't say 2 words. Within 2 years, they're fluent in French. So
also, it's a bit hypocritical because all of the international teams are naturalizing foreigners to play for the national team. But now you're telling the guys playing club rugby that they have to be in the country to play. Yeah. Just seems a bit hypocritical.
Well, it also seems a bit dated for me when the game is just moving at such a fast pace, where you want to protect Test rugby because otherwise it's Toulouse up against the Crusaders, up against Saracens, and usually contract and they go play in the States or in Saudi Arabia. So why devalue your Test team by not picking the best club players who are better than the ones that they've got in their home country?
It's crazy. The one thing I would like to change, if I could, is that make the French league somehow shorter so that France can actually properly come and tour here, because that's the one thing we've been robbed of.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Because their top 14 doesn't finish till July, and as a result, you mentioned DuPont, and he is unbelievable, and I would love South Africans to see him in your backyard, because we've been robbed of that.
Yeah, we had that in 2017 with Alistair when he won the series 3-0. But the French team actually arrived basically a week before the third test because they were playing the semi-finals of the top 14 and the finals. And it kind of devalued that whole 3-test series as well. And French rugby has always had that thing they could basically change 15 every week. But they have, under Galtier, settled on a very good squad of players. And yeah, I mean, I believe DuPont's not going to Australia with a French team. He wants to play centre now, maybe win. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, we were blessed in that sense that we did get to see the great Crusaders sides of McCaw and Whitelock and Reed and Dan Carter, Sonny Ball Williams when he played with them for a season.
Basically, if World Rugby just let us sort it out. We can sort it out right here. A couple more beers.
A couple more beers. We'll put on the braai a little bit later. But Tim, if you go back to when you get back now.
To cold, bleak.
To cold,
Manchester.
Manchester, and you go, so how's it to those 7 South Africans? And so they must be paying you a shitload of money to be here, to the Dupree brothers. But what do you say to someone who's thinking of coming to South Africa and to watch the Springboks, and especially 2026 when the All Blacks come for 8 matches?
Well, firstly, I say the earning pounds and spending rand is great. I don't know how you guys do it the other way. I guess a lot of people can't.
Yeah.
So that's great. But I would just say, in a heartbeat, go. And I think that is that's been what I have loved. I've never been to South Africa before I came during the Island Test, and I know a lot of people that have come on holiday and they've said, do this, do that, go there, go there. And it is the natural beauty is astounding. You know, look at that. Just out your window. It's amazing. But coming to see South Africa with rugby as part of your trip, you get to see the human part of South Africa that, you know, isn't just looking at an amazing view. It's getting under the skin, and that's what I feel that I've done, and that's what I've loved so much.
Your content when you left after the Irish series, and you were in your hotel room, and you said you were quite emotional about going. How do you feel this time?
Yeah, that time I was thinking, oh, sad to be going, but I get to come back in a month. I don't know when I'll come back again. I hope maybe actually might be next. I don't know.
Come back for the UFC final in the Cape Town Stadium.
There we go.
Yeah, well,
Hopefully we'll play the Bulls.
So I don't exactly know when I'll be coming back, but I know I will, and I know I've only scratched the surface as well. The more I learn and the more I experience, the more I realise I have to see and have to learn, have to understand. But rugby's going to be part of it, and that has been the best way to see this country. It's through the eyes of rugby fans.
And you've got an incredible following on your Eggchasers channel. But I went through the comments. I'm sure 90% of them are South Africans.
Well, right now, yeah. I mean, it'd be interesting, actually. That's a great point. November, Twickenham. When I'm walking around, who'll stop me more?
When you got that...
Bok fans or English fans?
I'm sure it's going to be the Bok fans because you're going to be wearing that green jacket. It's been wonderful having you in South Africa, following your content. It's wonderful to do a first-up collab. Hopefully the first of many.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because there's always that thing called Zoom. Checking in. How's it? Have a wonderful time at the West Coast tomorrow. Safe flight back, and South Africans love you. We love you. Keep on loving rugby, and enjoy the last 24 hours you got in Cape Town.
Cheers, guys.
Nice one.
Cheers.